Hi, John Hay Jaguars. This is chapter 9 of So Be It by Sarah Weeks. Even if Bernadette hadn't had AP, she wouldn't have been able to come with me on my trip. There's no way we could have brought Mama along, being the way she was about buses, and who else could have possibly taken care of her while we were away? I would have had to go alone no matter what. I didn't tell Bernie the morning I went down to the bus station to play the slots and get my ticket. She thought I'd gone to the library. It was the first time I had ever lied to her. I didn't like the way lying made me feel, so I was anxious to set it straight as soon as I got home. When I told her what I'd done and showed her the ticket, she was livid. "I've poured my whole self into you, Heidi," she said, "like warm milk into a bucket. Why are you doing this now? Why can't you just let things be?" "Because things aren't the way they're supposed to be," I said. "Well, how are they supposed to be?" she asked. "A person's supposed to know where they come from, Bernie." "We've been over this already," she said. "It doesn't matter where you came from. It only matters that you're here." "Well, maybe that's what matters to you, but I'm not like you, Bernie. I don't want to be like you, and I don't want to be like Mama either." "Are you trying to hurt me? Is that what this is all about?" she asked. "It has nothing to do with you, Bernie. It's about me. Don't you get it?" I shouted. "You think I'll forget about Soof and Hilltop and all the rest of it. You want me to forget, but I won't. If I do, I'll end up like Mama, full of missing pieces." "The pieces you're missing are not important ones, Heidi," Bernie said. "Don't tell me what's important," I yelled. "You don't know. You don't know anything. You want me to be like you, but if you really cared about you'd want me to be normal," I said. Bernie turned her face away sharply, as if she'd been slapped. "I feel as though I don't even know you anymore," she said, and burst into tears. I cried then too, partly because I felt bad about hurting her feelings, but mostly because I realized that what she'd just said was true. She didn't really know me anymore. I wasn't sure I knew myself. I wanted to go to Liberty. I needed to go. But I was also afraid, and I couldn't admit my fear to Bernie. She would have pounced on it like a cat on a yarn ball, unwinding my resolve. "It's not safe, Heidi," she said. "You're too young to go by yourself." I didn't tell her that it also wasn't legal. Why should I fuel her fire when I knew she'd find out soon enough anyway? "I have to go alone. You can't come with me, and neither can Mama. There isn't any choice," I said. "Yes, there is. Don't go," Bernadette was begging now. "Wait until you're older. Listen to me. I'm not saying forget about it. I'm saying give it time. We can keep calling Hilltop. We can keep showing your Mama the photographs. Maybe she'll remember something." "You're just saying that to try to keep me here. You know Mama can't remember things, Bernie." "I don't care what you say. I'm going." "You may not go to Liberty, and that is final, Heidi," Bernie said one last time. "You're not my mother," I shouted. "You can't tell me what to do. You're not even family. You're nobody. Nobody." Bernie snatched the ticket out of my hand. She was so angry she didn't even look like herself anymore. "Is this what you want, Heidi?" she hissed through clenched teeth, her hand shaking as she held the ticket up in front of me. "Is this all that matters to you anymore?" "Yes," I said. She looked at me hard and long. "Fine, then go. Just go," she said. She threw the ticket on the floor and stomped across the kitchen and through the doorway into her apartment, slamming the door behind her. It's the only time I remember ever seeing that door closed. Bernie and I didn't speak to each other for the rest of that day. I kept going out into the kitchen to check, but the door stayed closed, and for some reason I couldn't bring myself to open it. Mama asked for Det several times, but I was able to distract her and keep her occupied with the Flintstones coloring book and endless cups of tea. At dinner time, Bernie finally came over and heated up a can of stew. She spooned it onto plates for Mama and me, but she took her own plate back to her place. This time she left the door ajar. I put Mama to bed alone for the first time in my life. Luckily, she didn't give me a hard time. I even got her to shower and wash her hair, which was usually Bernie's department. Later, I took my bath, and when I was lying in bed, Bernie came in and sat on the very edge of the bed. "You mustn't lie to me ever again, Heidi," she said. "I had to, Bernie. Otherwise you would have tried to stop me from getting the ticket," I said, raising up on one elbow and squinting at her in the dark. I saw her smile a sad smile and shake her head a little. "We both know I can't stop you, don't we, Heidi Ho?" 3 days later, on the afternoon of September 22nd, I left for Liberty. I had tracked down Xander earlier in the day to say goodbye and to tell him I'd managed to convince Mrs. Chudikoff that he would make a good replacement babysitter for me. He was happy about getting the job, but mostly he wanted me to tell him again and again exactly what I'd said about him to Mrs. C. "I told her you're a good person," I said, "and a good friend." "For real? You said I was a good person? Swear on your mother's spit," he said each time. "Swear on my mother's spit," I promised. "Cool," he beamed. "Will you check in on Bernie and Mama?" I asked him. "Take out the trash? Bring up the mail?" "Yeah, but you're coming back though, right?" he said. I nodded and was a little surprised by how sad I felt having to say goodbye to him. Mama was in bed that day with one of her headaches. Bernie had already given her 4 Tylenols, but she was still moaning and holding her head. "Goodbye, Mama," I said as I leaned over her to kiss her cheek. "Back soon, Heidi?" Mama said, looking up at me. "Yes, Mama, back soon." The trip itself would take 3.5 days in each direction, but that wouldn't make any difference to Mama. She had no sense of time passing at all. I could have just as easily been going downstairs to check the mail that day. I stood at her bedside with Bernie's old beat-up PF blue suitcase in one hand, my backpack containing my list book and 2 ham and cheese sandwiches slung over my shoulder, and the ticket to Liberty carefully tucked into my jacket pocket. "Back soon, Heidi?" Mama said again, lifting her head off the pillow and smiling weakly at me. "Yes, Mama," I replied, but the truth was, I would not be back at all. Not as the same person I was that day, anyway. Bernie and I had made up after our big fight. She told me she forgave me for the angry things I had said, and even though I promised not to lie to her again, there was something changed between us, and I carried the weight of knowing that I had hurt her. It was impossible for her to hide her fear about my trip, but she knew my mind was made up and didn't fight me anymore, not even when she found out about the age limit. "I'll manage it," I told her, even though I wasn't sure how I would. Bernie even helped me pack. Sometimes it almost felt as though we were on the same side, but then she'd say something that made it clear again how totally against the whole thing she was. "This is all Thurman Hill's fault," she said bitterly right before I left Reno. "If he had just been willing to talk to us on the phone, you wouldn't be leaving now to go chase down that good-for-nothing 4-letter word." Her face went sad, and she looked like she was about to cry. "This is for you, Bernie," I said quickly, pulling a small cardboard tube out of my backpack and handing it to her. "What's this?" she asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She opened one end of the tube and slid out the shiny rolled-up paper inside. It was a map I had bought for her. I'd used a highlighter to mark the bus route from Reno to Liberty. There was another part to the gift, a plastic box of colored pushpins. The map is to put on the wall by the phone, Bernie. I'll call you at each stop, and you can use the pushpins to mark how far I've gone. You'll know exactly where I am that way, just like you always have. Bernie hugged me. I have something for you too, she said. She handed me a small box tied around with red yarn. Open this when you're on the bus, she said. We hugged again. Mama came out of her room still in her nightgown, her hair tangled and matted with sweat. I could tell from the way she was squinting that her head was still hurting. Kiss? Mama said, coming over and putting her arms around both of us, pressing her way into Bernie's and my embrace. I turned and pressed my cheek against her soft, smooth face. Mama felt my tears. Uh-oh, Heidi, she said. I love you, Mama, I said and kissed her. Mama pulled away. Tea, Heidi, she said, looking at me expectantly. No, Mama, no tea now. Oh, Dad, she said, holding her head. I know, precious. I'll tuck you back in when Heidi goes, and you can have more Jell-O, Bernie told her. Then she turned to me. You'll call from every stop? Yes, from every stop, I promised. And I want you to call me the second you get to Liberty, Bernie said, putting her hands on my shoulders, the way she always did when she wanted to make sure I was listening to her. I will, I promise, I told her. You've got your sandwiches and the money I gave you? Yes, I said. You remember the name of the cab company, she asked. Yes, Bernie, ABC. She had called Liberty Information and located a cab service right near the bus stop that could take me to Hilltop home. She tried to let them know at Hilltop that I was coming, but the woman who answered the phone there kept putting her on hold before Bernie could get it out. You'll call me when you get to Liberty and then again when you reach Hilltop? Yes, Bernie, I told her again. I promise. Don't tell anyone you're traveling alone. You pretend to be with someone at all times, someone who looks safe, a woman, someone who could be your mother. We'd been over these details a million times. Once you're at Hilltop, you get whatever answers there are to be gotten, Heidi, and then you climb right back on that bus and come back home to us. I will. She was still holding me by the shoulders, and when I tried to pull away, she slid her hands down my arms and took both my hands in hers. I have to go now, Bernie, I said. Reluctantly, Bernadette let go of my hands, and her arms fell heavily to her sides. Don't be afraid, she whispered. I'm not, I lied, even though I'd promised never to do that to her again. Heidi, Bernie's voice got thick and her eyes filled up again. Don't, Bernie, I'll be fine. You're going now, she said. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. When I got downstairs, I stood on the stoop and looked up. Bernadette and Mama were both standing at the window. Xander was sitting on the steps eating devil dogs. He handed me 2 unopened packages. For the road, he said. I wanted to hug him, but I wasn't sure how I'd feel about that, so instead I punched him in the arm. He grinned and punched me back, but not too hard. See ya, he said. I walked backward, my suitcase bumping against my leg, the box from Bernie tucked under my arm, waving to Mama and Bernie and Xander until I turned the corner. As I waited for the number 5, I set my suitcase and the box down on the curb. I was really doing this. I was going to New York by myself. I felt a strange hollow sensation in the pit of my stomach, and my mouth tasted funny, metallic, like the water from the drinking fountain at the library. I swallowed hard and looked up at the clear blue sky. It was comforting to know that a piece of that very same sky would be hanging over Liberty when I finally got there. Bernadette had been right. I was going to Liberty to chase down a 4-letter word. SOOF. And that's the end of this chapter.